Stage manager, the producer of the show, and the executive producer of Double Telling, with a theatre company that made Firebird, which I run with Marlie, who to be honest did 98% of the making of Firebird. So don't thank me. And we're joined by Chris Wilde and Natalie Johnson. Chris is a nationally recognised campaigner, author and director of Foster Greatness UK.
Yes.
Using his lived experience of the care system, he confronts stigma and drives urgent calls for reform. He's also the author of the best-selling books Damaged and The State of It, and he was named one of the Big Issues Top 100 Changemakers for his influential leadership in social and political activism. Sorry I didn't memerise all this.
That's all right.
There's too much.
Wow, that's a lot.
And Chris regularly appears on the BBC, in Channel 4 and LBC, and in Southwark Playhouse.
Yes.
And Natalie is a qualified social worker, independent domestic violence advisor, and doctoral researcher at the Child and Women Abuse Studies Unit in London Metropolitan University. Her research explores sexual abuse and exploitation among Black and Asian care-experienced young people, examining how race, identity, and the care system shape experiences of harm, disclosure, and professional responses. With more than 20 years' experience supporting women, children, and families, Natalie currently works with specialist organisation Amour Destiné. She's also contributed frontline expertise to a forthcoming BBC documentary examining the criminal sexual exploitation of girls in the UK. Wow. And lastly, Marlie, sorry, everyone's very accomplished, I've got a lot of bios. Marlie's the director and dramaturg of Firebird. She creates theatre that centres the female experience and which integrates text, image, sound, and lighting, as we've seen tonight, to expose the anatomy of our emotional lives. Her last show, the award-winning Run Sister Run, combined Chloe Moss's in the panel. I'll start with you,
yes,
Chris. The issue of grooming gangs has been in the media for quite a long time, since the 2010s. Many people here might have remembered the original, the most well-known case in Rochdale that provoked the writing of this play, or seeing the BBC drama Three Girls. From your perspective, what's changed over that time, and what challenges remain?
Well, to put a downer on it, nothing's changed as such. It's taken a long time for these stories to get to the media, for the survivors' voices to be heard, and I've been involved in these, the Independent Care Review, the Online Safety Bill, been involved in Longfield's reviews. These are reviews going back 10 years where that kind of evidence comes to the surface. Survivors' voices are being ignored. I mean, that play brought a lot of my own emotions back to me, because it was so powerful in truth and that vulnerability. Nothing's changed, and I say that because it's going to change, and it's only going to change by doing plays like this. Your performance was outstanding, by the way. Outstanding. I think what I want to say in this as well is it's really important that it's not just Rotherham. This is happening around the country, and it's happening in different cultures, different communities. There's a lot of emphasis in Rotherham around Muslim gangs in particular. It's not the case in Liverpool. It's white people. In Scotland, you know, but paedophiles are in every community. Predators are everywhere, and that's really important to understand when we start to think about the right wing and to try and force people to think about certain minorities what do this. Now, there's predators everywhere. The care system in particular is always, because it's on the precipice of collapse. It's, you know, these young girls in the care system are easy, accessible, but it's changing. And when I say it's changing because of plays like this, people like yourself writing plays like this, people like myself and yourself speaking up, speaking out, going on social media, and getting survivors to speak up and speak out. And there's a movement. There is a movement across the country right now, and that's to say, enough is enough. Enough is enough. Young people from deprived areas, I know it's the work what Lasting Support do, looking into Lasting Support, the work they do around grooming gangs and vulnerable young people who are abused. That, you know, we've got to do something. Policy is changing, legislation is changing. We've got a government now who's got a bit of backbone. We've got real politicians, backbenchers who have been through this, who are nurses, social workers, key workers. So that's the change in dynamics. It's not great, it's slow, we need to do more. We've got to protect young people, but the only way we can do that, and I say this constantly, I'm fighting with politicians all the time, lobbying Parliament, is we've got to speak up, speak out, and we've got to give plays like this the media attention, get it out there, because it's about raising awareness, and I'm sure you know that when you're doing your research. If you don't know about it, you turn a blind eye to it, but we've got to be harsh. And don't sugarcoat it, do not sugarcoat this is not a joke. Kids are being abused, kids are taking, last year 91 young people in our care system took their own lives. 91 too many. This change can't come quick enough, so I don't want to put down on this.
Yeah, no.
Nothing has changed as such, but the only change in that is that movement, but people have had enough. And we are fed up with young people getting treated like second-class citizens, especially in the care system.
We're really vulnerable. Another one has just been moved into a completely different side of London, and it's just kind of like, it's difficult what you're saying. And there's loads of great social workers and great people on the front line doing the work. And I think when, the social worker in the play, and she was kind of there saying, what can I do? Do you need a break? And do you want to do this? But she was also like, I need to be gone by 3. And that was said in front of the young person, and that's real. I was in a hospital with a young person who was having active psychosis, and the police said, well, can you make a bit of a scene in the hospital so you can get seen quickly because I need to get home to my kids. And she'd gone missing, and they sent a helicopter to look for her, and he said to her, do you know how much it costs per minute for that helicopter to look for you? So yes, there's great work, but there's also still really poor practice, and I think, the caseloads are still too high. The level of care in the service, it's not sustainable for individual social. I'm a social worker. I was in a leaving care service, and I had a caseload of 22 young people. How much can you give when you've got 22 young people? And I think, when I think about the way the police were speaking to Tia, and there was an element of care there, but there was also kind of like, you need to do this, and there's that really like responsibilizing of the young person. She's a child, she's terrified, but in that moment it's like, well, if you don't say anything, we can't help you. And it's, the language we use around young people, and I think especially when we're looking at like black and other racially minoritized people, the adultification that's applied to them, we're not using an intersectional lens, we're not thinking, and everything's kind of looked at in silos. And then even if we do have a young person and then she's come out of this exploitation, and then she's maybe placed somewhere else and she's starting college, actually, in that moment she might be doing okay, but longer term, what are the impacts of all the things she's been through? What are the services that we're offering? What are the counselling and the long-term therapeutic support? Especially for children, the waiting list of CAMS. Everybody knows, it's so long and it's so difficult. So I think it's just how we think about them, the words we use when we're talking about them, and just really, really thinking holistically about this person and beyond the incident, beyond the sexual exploitation. What does their whole life look like? Where are the other areas?
Treating them like human beings.
Yeah, it really is quite simple.
So I'll come back to you.
Yes,
there's a change of government, new Prime Minister from the part of the world where this play's set. When Adolescence came out, it felt like a story about boys and men that immediately triggered policy change. And when this case, the first case, came to the news, and when 3 girls came out, as you said, nothing changed. And I'm interested if you would put in number 10 tomorrow, what policy suggestions would you make? What needs to change at a practical level to mean that the next 10 years aren't the same?
So people who don't know my work is that we started campaigning for years, because I was involved in independent care review with Josh McAllister. We started campaigning to make care experience a protected characteristic. So we've got 132 councils pass that motion. That means that it'd be against the law to treat young kids in the care systems, dumping them in squalor, semi-independent care homes at 14 years old with no support workers. And people say, no, doesn't happen. It happens. That's my work. I know that. It happens where kids are just dumped because there's no resources. Now, the difference is with Andy Berman, and you've got like Josh McAllister. Now, Josh, people might say Josh is a politician, but he's a human being, and he's probably the first and only most passionate minister we've had, children's minister, who really gets it. And he gets it because he listens to the voices of lived experience. And I think that's where there's a change in dynamics, where I don't want to make it political, but it is. But the last party, we couldn't sit around a table with politicians and people like me. I come from a children's home which is run by paedophiles. I've seen rape and abuse on a different level, like a different level. So when we're talking about legislation change and policy, I'm passionate about it. And I'm sat around a table and I'm giving them these facts and this evidence and saying to people, this is what's happening. And it's now, there's a change in dynamics. It just can't continue. Does that make sense to people? It can't continue. You can't hide it anymore. We've got kids who've been, only 6 months ago, a 15-year-old girl was raped in a care home in Durham. Did anyone hear that on the news? No. She was raped by 2 grown men who was running a care home. There was no vetting process. So making care experience a protected characteristic is one thing. And extending corporate parenting, this is what you're up against in politics. So they did, in the World Children's Wellbeing Bill, we put in a motion to extend corporate parenting, and that means everybody has to have due regard. We lost in Parliament. So due regard means if you're driving down a road and you see a naked child, you stop the car and make sure that child's all right. You do something about it. You're a human being. Have due regard. And government threw it out and said, no, you only have to be alert. Be alert means you saw it. That's it. So we're still fighting against, the rights of children and treating them like human beings. But there is a change in dynamics. Berman gets it. This new Labour government gets it. but you've got to be strict with legislation. You've got to do that. Making care experience protected characteristic is one. The online safety bill, I sat in that for 2 years. It's still on the cabinet in Whitehall. It can save people's lives. And the only way we're going to do it is, I hope these politicians come and see your performance. And there's another one, there's another play we saw recently called A Dollhouse. And that hits home hard. So we've got to change legislation, we've got to speed it up, we've got to, the likes of Lasting Support, Warder, if anyone doesn't come and meet Warder and Paisley, they are fighting for the rights for young girls who are abused in all different walks of life. And I want to see the likes of Warder and Paisley sat around the table as well. And I think Josh will do that. He will change the system. So more stringent legislation and more stuff like this. More plays, please. Please, more plays.
This wasn't the story we saw today, but you've done a lot of work, particularly on, at the local level, how to protect girls at risk of exploitation, particularly black, mixed heritage and racialised girls, whose experiences might be overlooked or adultified, as you said earlier, or criminalised. Could you talk to that? And we've talked about government level change. Could you talk about some local level change that you've worked on here?
It's funny though, because I was thinking about Tia's relationship with her friend and actually the importance of that relationship. But I was thinking in practice, we would disrupt that relationship because actually Tia would be a bad influence on the other girl, and that relationship wouldn't be, she'd be seen as being a risky young person, and then that would be something that we wouldn't actually really give understanding to that context, because she told her friend what happened. When the police was there kind of badgering her, she found that really difficult, but actually she trusted her friend. And by having trust, and it can be a professional, but it might be somebody else, it might be a social worker. More times it doesn't seem to be, but it can be one person, it can be somebody. In my service, we do that kind of long-term work, so we build up that relationship with young. Recently I was at a sexual assault referral clinic, and she said to me, don't tell my social worker. And it's kind of the difficulty of balancing that and that, having those boundaries, but also allowing the young person to build that trust, but also still explaining as a professional our duties.
Yes.
But I think it's just really thinking about that whole person. So Tia had mentioned a foster carer, Tia had mentioned a birth mother, and we don't know the context of those kind of situations around. She'd mentioned, it didn't sound like she was very close to her foster carer, that's someone potentially she could be living with for how many years. But actually it's just really looking at all the relationships around the young person, looking at the spaces they're accessing. There's a lot of great work coming out about contextual safeguarding, and looking at harms outside of the home and where are the places that these young people frequent. And I was thinking as well when Tia was speaking to the police, and it was not the first time, they were saying, last time. And I was thinking about a lot of the young black people I work with who won't speak to the police. And then especially there's that double bind, if the perpetrator is a black man, then they have this really tension about not wanting to report because of the racism in the police and all that difficulties. And we've had a lot of, I work in Tower Hamlets, there's a lot of Asian families I work with, and actually the professionals aren't asking the questions that need to be asked sometimes because they don't want to be seen as being racist. So there's all these kind of tensions that are happening on the ground. And like you were saying, we need to be speaking about it, we need to be, and even what you were saying when you said, and we were talking about the show and kind of being forced to look at it and kind of sit with it. And I think that's the difficulty, isn't it? That nobody actually wants to sit and hear the things that aren't working, when there's quite a lot that still isn't working.